Hello, my friends. Nice to see you. It's a cold, rainy day here in November. Had a bunch of storms in October. You just can't count on the weather staying seasonal, but that's okay. I wanted to talk about something I got on WhatsApp from a good friend of mine who's into the conspiracy and heterodox space. Not to say that I'm not into the conspiracy and heterodox space. I am, I like it. It's fun, it's fascinating, it's entertaining. And it's always good to look into things and see, where the thinking goes wrong or right or whatever it might be. And since our world is so full of conspiracies these days and they're so easy to disseminate over social media, you can't get away from them. In fact, they're being weaponized now. So going into the midterm elections in the United States of Numericals, you'll see how both sides weaponize conspiracies of either the subtle propagandistic kind or the more overt type, like the whatever letter anons and whatnot. Anyway, I wanted to talk about binaries. We can discuss various kinds of logical fallacies, but for now, let me just say the exclusion of the middle type thing, where I tend to think along a gray scale, from left to right, or else pixels, how many pixels, how detailed an image can you see when you zoom in? How much data is behind it, and so on. How deep is the knowledge and research behind the ideas? How broad are they? How dimensional are they? How divorced from just pure emotional, ideological gamesmanship are they? We tend to live in a very complex, globalized world, hence we're talking via tubes right now, and things aren't that simple. So what I got this time was quite entertaining. It was a bunch of this versus that thing, binaries like us and them, black and white, 0 and 1, whatever. So anyway, the first one was climate change man-made versus modeled nonsense.
And if you choose to fail us, I say we will never forgive you.
Now, this binary is just plain ignorant. If you want to learn about the climate crisis, you can go to many, many good sources and learn about the science and the scientific evidence and the various lines of evidence across multiple domains that exist and have existed for decades. The climate crisis is happening rapidly, more rapidly than any time in history. You can look at ice cores for that, as well as other lines of evidence, but I'm not going to go into that. It's complicated. Go to scienceskeptic.org or any other number of sites to learn about that. Anyway, this climate crisis has been weaponized, as you know. So, if you're on one side ideologically, you're going to say it's a modeled nonsense. This is ridiculous. It's just plain ignorant. So that's, if you're that stubbornly ignorant about a subject, there's no moving you. So you can just hang tight until circumstances dictate what you have to do next.
World is waking up, and change is coming whether you like it or not. Thank you.
Whether it's dealing with refugees or moving your home or whatever, you will find out So the next one is ethnic repression versus cultural difference. Now this one really bugs me too, because culture is a big subject. And of course, if you're studying cultures across culture from an anthropological lens or any other perspective, you'll note that there are profound cultural differences in the way we think about things, what we do, how we live, how we react emotionally to things, and so on. It's such a big subject, so you can't really versus it against any one thing. That's just plain ridiculous. There is a certain amount of complexity in the world that requires some study and understanding and reading and so on, and experience to figure out. Culture is one of those things. Ethnic repression, yes, it exists. What can I say? We don't have to go to the woke lens to figure that out. There's evidence of this all over the place and always has been throughout history. Some ethnic groups are repressed. There is a thing called genocide, and we've witnessed it, and we might be witnessing it right now. Who knows? But anyway, ethnic repression exists. So why do we have to make some stupid, shallow binary about it? Only people who are ideologically a member of a club that they don't want to be ostracized from would do that. The old American psycho, I just want to fit in thing. So sexuality obsession versus sexuality obsession versus civil rights issue. Well, yes, when we talk about economies or politics or nation states or kingdoms or whatever, civilization, we have to talk about law, under the law, whose law, who makes the law, and civil rights is a matter of law. If we're going to have rights to anything, right to breathe, right to drink water. Yes, we pay for water services, but we need water and air to breathe. And yes, there are civil rights, and we can talk about those. We can change those if we want to. They exist. And you want the king to tell you what your rights are, or do you want the dictator or the autocrat, or do you want the dictatorship of the people, the ignorant masses? You got to figure that out for yourself. But, the sexuality obsession, of course, that's coming from the woke, postmodernist kind of hand-waving freakoutery that we see. The woke mob, the crazy feminist postmodernists are out to get us, the big kind of new Red Scare type of thing. And sexuality is a thing. It obviously is. I'm not a big fan of the whole pronoun thing myself, but I'm an old fart, so what the heck do I know? Anyway, yes, sexual identity exists, it's a thing, and we have to deal with it. That's just the way things are, so. But it's versus civil rights issue? What? It depends what you want to include into it. Like, how big is your circle of, what is the breadth and width of your ethical altruism? What do you want to include in your sphere of compassion? What will you carry across for? Maybe not that, it goes too far. Okay, whatever, talk about that. Hopefully you won't get censored for saying you could talk about that, but anyway. So, unelected state takeover versus political incompetence. Well, yes, no democracy is perfect. Some people don't even like the idea of democracy, which is their thing. The UK has a new prime minister, and no, he wasn't elected through a plebiscite. He was elected by people in parliament, players of the game, representatives, if you will. And so that's a thing. If you want a different kind of government, you can work to change it or create something new somewhere, somehow. But anyway, yeah, that's a thing. So unelected state takeover, huh? Who are the lawmakers? Who put them there? If you think corporations put them there, multinational corporations and big global capital put them there, then you'll have to do something about it if you don't like it, other than just create a stupid binary, this versus that thing. Political incompetence, ubiquitous, can we not say? Right? So who's your best king ever? You know, turn the pages, come up with some fantasy about that. But yeah, there is incompetence. So what? How do we get competent politicians? Under what structures? Within what system are we going to have people who take responsibility for their leadership and their decisions and how they lead and who they answer to and so on? And if the people, le peuple, are not going to stand up and do something about it, then we're just going to have to kind of go along with whatever works, as it were. Political incompetence, ubiquitous. What can I say? Brexit leaves sabotage, I love that, versus Brexit is a disaster. Well, it's kind of funny because Brexit is done and dusted, and how can you sabotage it? Well, maybe you can reverse it if the world wanted to do that, if the UK citizens wanted to do that, but it's kind of over. So is it a disaster? It depends on your point of view. It depends on your perspective. It depends on your political ideology and so on and so forth. You can look at the UK and say, how are they doing? How's their economy doing? How's their culture doing? How's their station in the world doing? Are they a good servant of the United States of new miracles or a bad servant of the United States of new miracles? What do they represent now? Look around the world. It's pretty much anglicized in many ways, isn't it? Anyhow, the legacy of the British Empire and Raj and all of those East India companies and so on is well intact, so let's not worry too much about it. You're out. You're out. How can anyone sabotage that? They can say, I don't like it. That's not sabotage. Kind of dumb. Dumb. Oh, bat virus? Sorry, please don't take this down. I don't have an opinion on this. Yes, I do, but I'm not going to express it here. Or biolab escape. Well, the fact is, all the information is not in. Hence, things change as we get more data and more knowledge in. We might not ever know where it came from. There are great arguments about the, zoonotic thing, and then the Senate comes up with an interim report based on whatever sources they want to have, and it's the Senate, don't you know? Anything to do with incompetent or corrupt politicians? Who knows? But it comes from one side of the aisle. And at the end, when you look at the end of the teeny tiny little paper, it equivocates, it disclaims, and it says, all the info isn't in yet, it just needs more research. So it's not a conclusive report by any stretch, but certain British nurses want to treat it as a scoop because it's good for their YouTube channel, which is fine, and we can pretend like it's a scoop when it's just another trickling little bit of biased information coming out from a governmental body. Big deal. Look at the scientific consensus and whatnot. Read those scientific papers if you can, if you know how. And go to Peter Attia for a little blurb on that. But you can obviously take a course, an open online massive mofo course to learn how to understand statistics a little better, or probability theory a little better, or whatever. Anyhow, we may not know exactly what happened for a long time. Books will be written when all the data's in. I read books about Afghanistan 10 years into the war that were fairly interesting for me, and I read some 20 years into the war that filled out more information about Afghanistan for me, so I feel like I have a fairly interesting or decent perspective on what happened over there, but whatever. You triangulate and you try to understand something if you're interested in it. If not, you just let those forever wars be something in the background noise that you don't have to pay attention to. The next one is a vaccine. Oh no, I mentioned it. Versus bioweapon. That's a stupid binary as well.
This isn't exactly a disclaimer, but I do want to make it perfectly clear that all the vaccines around the world that were produced to help us mitigate the worst possible outcomes of the pandemic are not bioweapons. They were produced to contribute to public health and welfare. And that's that. Vaccines are good. Vaccines save lives. Vaccines are not bioweapons. Thank you.
And if I were going to conspire with thousands and thousands of people to do something terrible to humankind, I could certainly come up with a better way to do something terrible to humankind. But that doesn't mean that we should not regulate and be very, very careful what we do with science, especially biological science, because, these things can get out of hand. But we still have nuclear weapons, don't we? And we're upgrading them for some stupid reason, making them hypersonic so they can't be shot down, so they're really first strike, blah, blah. But never mind that. Let's not go to that existential risk clock. Let's just forget about it and let the money go where it needs to go, to shareholders and hedge funds and bankers and billionaires, so that in the future there'll be trillionaires all over the place. 20 new trillionaires made in the United States and China last year. Whoop-de-doo. Next one is EU, NATO, Ukraine meddling versus Putin as a megalomaniac. Look, I'm not saying, okay. Putin's probably a megalomaniac. And NATO probably meddles a little bit because, it's one of those kind of organizations where people have to do certain things to accomplish certain things, objectives and whatnots for security and whatnot, and people want to join it for some reason. There must be some utility in being a member and whatnot. So these binaries are absolutely useless. Putin didn't do the right thing. Nobody likes it. I think most people don't like war and whatnot. As I've said many times before, the time to start negotiating for peace is 10, 20 years before the bullets start flying. But maybe that's not so profitable. Who knows? So, yeah, Vlad, not a nice guy. NATO may be overstepped. Who knows? But do people have the right to join these international organizations or not? I don't know. We have to decide. International laws, rule-based systems and whatnot. So unipolar NATO hegemony versus polypolar coexistence. So Eurasia and so on. Well, there's polypolar, and then there's the global economy and global financialized capital. And capitalism, which is ubiquitous, and so on, and the players that play that game. I don't know if that's unipolar or not, and we have nation states, a rather, nascent concept in the history of civilization, but we have them. They have their laws, their rules, their ideas about how to govern themselves, and they make alliances with other nation states, and then you can call it polar or whatever. Hegemony, one world government? I don't think so. But anyway, Star Trek, not anytime soon. I don't know if we're going to survive to see something like that. So let's just continue with the Star Wars scenario because it's more exciting. The stories are more exciting and more biblical, and they make more money. So let's continue with that, shall we? But these kind of shallow binaries, what good are they? What do they illustrate? I don't know. Financialized global trade versus national self-sufficiency. Yes, really? Is any nation on Earth self-sufficient in any way? Especially with the technology that I'm using right now to talk to you. Do we not need a certain kind of labor force in Congo to get the rare earths to make this stuff? Where are the chips manufactured? Where did the technology come from? Who owns the intellectual property rights? How were these things shipped? The logistics, everything, all the materials, the energy. We're talking about oil and gas here, right? I mean, it is global. It is financialized. There's no question about that. So what is the freaking thing? Self-sufficiency? Are you self-sufficient? Are you living in the woods, growing your own food, hunting and gathering in a small band of people, surviving off-grid and so on? No? Then forget about that. That's ridiculous. Look, libertarianism can be taken a little bit too far. I don't really have a problem with it, but you can go a little bit too far in your fantasy of self-sufficiency. Just like having a weapons cache close to something doesn't mean that you can beat the Navy SEALs and the Air Force, Army, and the Marines, and the Delta Force, and the FBI, and the police force, and everything like that. Just because you have some guns doesn't mean you're gonna win anything. Sorry. Oh, irony, sarcasm, please don't take the video down. You're smart enough to understand. I'm not advocating any of that stuff. Depopulation mania versus water conservation. Well, the world, in particular Ukraine and Russia, has been depopping. The population has been declining for decades. For various reasons, and nobody had to have a conspiracy to make that happen. Xi Jinping wants Chinese people to have babies now because of economic reasons connected to a certain kind of economic growth that we know is not sustainable because we don't live in a world with infinite resources, and we don't have fusion power yet. And even if we did, we would use that energy to make more stuff, and ephemeralization would never put a dent in it. If we want to have this particular kind of economic growth forever, then it's not going to last very long. So you can forget about the forever and the next generations and whatnot. We're going to have to think about a different kind of growth, which means whatever. We might have to, be content at 8 to 10 billion people on the planet and figure out how to manage resources wisely so that we can all live decent, dignified, healthy lives. But as I've often said, circumstances is the most brutal and dire dictator the world has ever known. So whatever happens, we'll get those circumstances slapping us in the face. Always, anytime soon, in 5 years, 40 days, 22 hours, or whatever. We're going to have to deal with these things regardless, so we might as well look at all of this information and the sciences behind it and the thinking behind it very carefully and understand what's what so that we can make decent decisions. So, I'll just finish with this before I go on to make another video about this. But some dance to remember versus some dance to forget. Bulianti, out.